Greetings and salutations, friend. I am Jeremy Tank, and if you are watching this, I am your brand guy. What does that mean? That means you've got someone on your side, in your corner, ready to talk to you about what it means building a brand. And in this time, this place, this market, this world that we're in, everything is your brand. And really what I'm talking about is your personal brand if you're watching this, because I'm hoping that you're a business owner. Maybe you're not, but you know what? Everybody in this day and age is working on something called a brand. And essentially, whether that means you work for yourself, or you work for somebody else, or you work for a giant corporation, or you work for the government, how people view you is your brand. The things that they think about when they think about you is your brand. The think about everything you're doing and influencing the world, whatever that means, is your brand, right? And I'm kind of the guy that's just here to talk about that stuff and help you kind of figure out what that is. And I focus a lot on identity and knowing how your identity, your emotions, your memories, your experiences influence who you are. Because the challenge with where we are in the world and what we're doing and all this noise, which is a lot of what we live in right now, is compensation. We are trying to compensate for the love we didn't feel, trying to just the attention, the love, the knowing that we are enough, the worthiness, right? There's this base level that is very victimized and feels that we have to do a lot of things to get out of that. So today what I want to talk about is the complications of language in general and being. Because this has a lot to do with your focus as a business person going into a brand, your focus as a CEO and your corporation and what that brand is, any products that you have, the brand's there. Because when you understand sort of how language and being affects the connection, the relationship with everyone, everything around you, then you can actually start intentionally crafting some of this stuff a little bit more. Choosing words and pictures that actually share to the world who you are and what you do. And the reason this came up, let me just tell you a little story. The reason this came up is I was talking with a friend, and we were talking about when you go into a store and you find something you like, and you start to look for, if this is something you've experienced, comment down below, say, oh yeah, I've gone through that, I've been in the store. But you go into the store, you find something you like, maybe it's on a discount, maybe it's a bargain, maybe it doesn't have a price tag, and then you go to someone to try and help you. And I don't know, this seems to happen to me quite a bit, okay? I go to somebody to try and help me, and they end up having to call somebody else, who calls somebody else, who calls somebody else, who calls somebody else, and really, I'm just trying to buy a thing. I'm trying to conduct a business. I'm just trying to do the thing in a store, right? And yet somehow more people get looped in and looped in and looped in until eventually you talk to somebody who actually has authority to do whatever it is that just let me check out. Just let me check out and leave your store. That's generally how I feel by the end of this entire thing. And when I was having this conversation with my friend, I said, it has to do with people not hearing well. They're oftentimes trying to do their job. They're so focused in themselves and their own life and what they're doing, they don't hear what you're saying. What you're saying, what you're trying to convey is, are you someone of authority who can resolve this matter for me? And a lot of people think, especially when you're working for a store, yeah, I've got authority, I can deal with it. It's got to be an easy solvable problem. But a lot of times they don't have authority. They just they desire authority. They want to put in and kind of mess their fingers about in the puddle, stomp in the puddle of whatever problem's going on, because they want to be the one to solve it. They want to be the hero. But not everybody can be the hero. And so there's this fundamental stretchiness, gooiness of language. And part of this, let's go back to before you're even born, okay? Before you are even born, your cells, your brain, those parts of you that are awake, that are able to experience, they say that babies in the womb have a purely experiential sensory environment, that they feel what the mother feels, they experience sound. That's the most developed sensory sense. How about just that? The most developed sense. And in the womb, like, they experience and feel all of these things, and it actually influences how they see the world, what they, when they come out of the womb. These experiences, and I've said this before, it's sort of a cellular experience. And if you go by polyvagal theory, which is that all this stuff enact fight or flight responses in the back of the brain, and then it takes that energy and kind of places it somewhere in the body. So even in the womb, memory, consciousness, experience is actually driven by what is going on through the mother and through sound, and actually light and heat. Like, all of these things actually affect the baby. And then after you're born, until about the age of 7, your brain remains in this highly malleable state called, it's a brainwave state called theta state. And it's sort of, you dip into theta state when you are in hypnosis or when you're going to sleep. And it's very open. It's very easy to program the subconscious mind in that. And the subconscious mind, again, if we're looking back, is really what's influenced by the body. So the heart, the gut, your gut instinct. And it's all the kind of stuff that ties into that. So you haven't even really learned by age 7 how to be a person, how to respond with a dialogue, to listen. But you have at least a good foundation of language, because at that point your brain has absorbed your culture, your location, your family, and some good speech. So you're holding 7-year-old conversations, which, if you have those, there's fun conversations, right? The brain, the imagination is just amazing. But there's a lot of programming that's going on in the background by the brain and by the body. And then what happens as you get older is, because the brain isn't quite as adaptive, it's not quite as spongy, in that theta state, you end up going through the school process, and it is a process, because through repetition, through conditioning, through emotional conditioning, a lot of, at least school for me, was very much emotional conditioning. People had to behave, had to sit, had to be silent, had to pay attention, had to do the homework. And if you don't, you get written up, you get suspended. Like, if you do things outside the norm, and that's really where norms become an important part of who you are. Do you fit into a group? What is their norms? When you're trying to feel safe and feel secure and feel like you belong, feel like you're worthy ofness, like all of these things that tie into our behaviors later in life, they're really formed right in this really strong, incredibly malleable shape, like 0 to 14, right? 0 to 15, 16 sometimes. So even before you're born, your subconscious is making these emotional, physical, conscious memories. And then when you're born till about 7, you are absorbing everything on your culture, everything you see, everything you hear. You repeat stuff back, you create more stories. The imagination in your head is just going wild, because theta state, man, it's really wild. It's imagination, it's storytelling. It's when you get, if you're an artist, a flow state. If you're a writer, flow state. If you're a musician, flow state. If you're just working and you lose track of time, you're in that flow state. This is sort of what that is. Like, you just go. And in kids, it's just everything coming in and absorbing through them. But that also goes into their body and into their mind, and it ties all together. And then as they get older than 7, definitely the repetition of school and society, the dogmatic nature of behaving, belonging. Remember, we still have a lot of that caveman consciousness back in our limbic brain, our midbrain, our lower portions of who we are. We hold on to a lot of that on an instinctual level that we don't even really realize. So what happens is that conditioning in school, in college, in work is very, I want to use the word threatening. It's not so threatening. Leaving that conditioning becomes a threatening thing. It becomes very fearful. When things end, it's scary, because we get used to the community that we're around, the things that we're doing. In fact, that familiarity, that subconscious familiarity, keeps us safe, or is meant to keep us safe in caveman times. But again, we don't live in caveman times, so it's a little trickier these days. And now it really, it's what's meant to keep us safe and productive and growing and moving forward is actually keeping us held back. It's actually maintaining a status quo that is not helpful to the tribe, that is not helpful to the community, that is creating a caste system that keeps people in their place. And recognizing that, it kind of becomes up to the individual. How do I help break outside of this caste system, right? How do I help break out of the society that is now been in place for hundreds of years, that definitely over the last 80 to 100 should have been adapting better, should have been growing better? So this is where I'm coming from, looking at this and going, okay, the complications of language and being is what I want to talk about today, because all of this kind of shoved together in a little Mr. Potato Head, hi, kind of idea, because you take all the parts and you put them inside, and that's how you store the thing. Well, all of us, we take all of these parts, all of these pieces, and then we shove it inside of us and say, okay, now go ahead and relate to the world. So, how do we relate to the world? Starts with language. And language is tricky because language differs by education level. And education is self-education. It's also the forced, societal education. Social education, how do you behave in your culture, how you respond to people. And there are common things that were sort of that still built into that caveman-y nature, like reciprocity. The idea that if somebody gives you something, that you are at some level required to give something back to that person. And the idea here is that keeps society moving forward in a positive manner, right? When you give something to somebody else, you kind of go, okay, I see they might need something, or I just feel generous, or I feel this, but you do it. There's a part of your brain that actually goes, okay, I will be looking for something back. I am looking for something to help build our connection together, to help us be tighter people, tighter friends, and that helps society in general. And language is one of those things, because when you share a language with someone, it becomes a fantastic bonding thing. And I certainly know in some of the time I've spent overseas, just kind of visiting different countries, when you find somebody that speaks your language or you hear your language, it can be a great surprise. It can really lift you up because there's a commonality. You feel a culture, a bond, something that binds you together. And even if they're not at the same education level about whatever you're saying, it's very helpful. And a lot of times, I only know a couple of different languages, and I'm not super fluent in any of them other than English. But I try my best when I go places. I try my best to speak whoever's language that I visit, because it ties people together, and it helps express what's inside. And it's making those connections, right? That the same kind of connections that you build inside, if you do not express that outwardly, then it just stays inside. And language, by education, you have to be taught to communicate a certain way. If you're not, then oftentimes the brain receives signals that say, it's safer to not speak, it's safer to remain quiet, it's safer to not rock the boat, it's safer to, hear all these things, it's safer to. And that's part of what education helps break out of that, is you're learning how to move past your base level of programming. It's complicated, but everything that you learn is helping you grow and be more than you are. And when you can grow and be more than you are and understand that you are accepted like that, and that other people value the things that you can bring to them, and when you share your opinions, that those opinions are worthwhile, you are A, building your brand, which is something I love, but B, you're creating a relationship. And that really is what a brand is a relationship with someone, so that you can share just the crap you know. So that's a little bit about language and education. So there's also language in memory and experience. When you have an experience, let me try that again. So imagine you're on a bridge, you're gonna bungee jump. And you do the bungee jump, and you go down, and you come up, and you are telling your friend, oh, it feels so good, and I felt like a rush to my head, and I felt like falling, just incredible falling, and just openness, and then I was so scared, and then it wasn't anything. It was like I just went blank, and whoa. And your friend goes, wow, I want that. And your friend goes, and your friend jumps, and when they come back, they just say, that was awful. That was the worst ever. I was so scared. I was so tight. I was clenching. My back hurt. My chest hurt. My neck hurt. My feet hurt. Like everything hurt. And my heart was pounding so hard. And I was having a panic attack. And I had to... So this is same experience, two different types of language. One type of language talking about the experience in a really positive way, and one type of language talking about the experience in a negative way. Now, those two things can be talking about the exact same experience, and that's part of what makes our perception and connecting with others and just being so damned hard, because you and I can be talking about the exact same thing from two sides of the spectrum. And something I keep saying over and over again, one of the primary functions of the brain is comparison. So if you two are looking at the same exact experience, if you're talking about it very differently, how do you meet in the middle? Well, you keep talking. You express, well, okay, well, what did that feel like? What did that feel like in your body? What did that feel like in your head? What were you telling yourself? What were the words that you used? So there's this whole idea that a lot of the experiences that we have are very personal, right? All that stuff that happens inside the womb, all the stuff that happens between the age of 0 and 7, and certainly our schooling experience and all the things that we are trained, wherever we are trained to be a good citizen, a good person. Hi, Teresa, thanks. But just because you grew up a certain way, you did a certain thing, doesn't mean that somebody can see who you are and the value you bring to the world. You have to work on the communication in between. And that's work. It's sticky, certainly for certain couples that talk to one another, and because of different backgrounds, because of different insights, because of different beliefs, they see things very, very differently. And until they reach a point of either, I would say mutual acceptance, but really finding a common ground is necessary. And that is one of the most troublesome things, actually, the most difficult things, is to find the middle ground in two opposing standpoints because of the contrast, the judgment that the brain wants to apply. I'm right, you're wrong. This is how I experienced it, therefore anything other than that is wrong. That is a really standard thing to think. I've had to work past that myself in many different instances, because it is a snap judgment of the subconscious, of the physical, of the ego, all the things that want us to say that we are different, that we are separate, that we are not the same, which is true. We're all the same because we're not the same. We are completely different from each other and supportive in our unity. Humans are so weird, right? We're just so weird. So the other one is language by culture, because I know that I grew up in Phoenix for several years, and my wife grew up in San Diego, and we talk about really similar things. And these two locations, in coordination with the world, are pretty close together. I mean, you could drive the distance in less than a day. And I don't know, I certainly looked at that when I met her. I was like, oh, there's so much that we have in common. We understand the cultures, we have the certain same loves, we have the certain same things. And the more that I have grown to love her and adore her, the more that I have had to witness that, wow, her paradigm of the world is so drastically different than my paradigm of the world. And it's strictly due to the culture she was brought up in, the community she was in, the schools that she went to, the way that her family looked at the world, the way that her community looked at the world, the way that her schools looked at the world, and culture and society. Even if you're using the same words, even if we're talking about the same things, I mean, the United States is technically one culture, right? We can identify, here's all the people in the American United States. Here are the citizens of the United States. And even right now, we have multiple culture wars going on within the United States, where one word can mean something completely different to another person. So that's part of the challenge that we're talking about here with language and being, because from the point that we're born, from the point that we're being raised and then trained, tutored, fostered, programmed in school, in college, and all these things to behave, to listen, to follow the rules, to cross at the crosswalk and not in between where all the cars are. Like all these different things that we're supposed to learn and behave so that we can be a good citizen and survive and do all of this. At the point that we start communicating with each other is where we mess it up. And part of the reason that language is so damn difficult is because of all of the subconscious training, the theta frequency, the growing up, all the different stuff that's trained into us, it actually gets to a point where okay, imagine this. Maybe you've been to one of these carnivals or the circuses or one of these things, state fairs, where they have the giant jar of jelly beans, and your job is to guess how many jelly beans are in the jar, and the closest one without going over wins the prize, right? Wins the pot. Well, the more experiences that you have in the womb and in that before 7 theta state, all of the really traumatic, scary things in your life that like coming up against an angry dog, or getting like mauled by a cat, or a rabid gopher is thrown in your bed. I don't know. It's just the picture that popped in my head. All the things that happen to you, they train you in some way to be different, to not get in that circumstance again. And what that does in a large sense is it shatters who you are inside. None of these things mean anything. All of these words are just made up. And that's the hardest part of me trying to convey what I'm trying to say to you, because the ideas here are just that, ideas. They are representations of a concept, and the words are not precise. And trying to tell them to you, I keep saying things over and over again in different ways in all of these videos, because I understand how imprecise language is. It's very challenging. There are very specific definitions of words that I want to share with you, and I don't know if you have the background, the perception to be able to get all of it. So I've got to come up with funny similes and metaphors, and maybe it makes more sense that way. So imagine that somebody does have a badger thrown into their bed at night. Suddenly, they're going to have trust issues probably for the rest of their life, right? Who are they ever going to trust to sleep around? That is our most vulnerable point, the point where we really need to trust others most. And that is going to really defy any kind of trust in anybody moving forward, should that happen. Also, they probably aren't going to like badgers very much. And nothing wrong with badgers. Badgers are badgers. Whatever the circumstances are, it's going to create a trauma. And that trauma is going to be something that takes a little piece of your personality, a little piece of who you are, and it's gonna have, maybe you have this, maybe it's that you have that little voice in your head that when something happens, you just hear something, right? It's a little whispering, and sometimes it tells you, this person's going to hurt you. Maybe it tells you you really shouldn't eat those nachos. Maybe it tells you, it's okay, you've had a hard day, eat the whole pizza, right? I've had too many pizzas and ice cream days just because that's the stress kind of got me there in the past. Like I said, I'm not a small guy. I'm like 6'1" and 270 pounds. So, I understand that some of these things have hit me in my life, and it has made me who I am. It's made me the physical body of who I am and where I am. And so I use these examples because these are things that really resonate with me. So the whole idea here is that you are, it's okay. The whole concept is called parts theory or fractions theory or fractals or cracks or, there's a couple different names for it. And I've read a few different things, and it seems to be that they're all talking about the same basic concept. And the concept is that every time you have an experience like this, and they don't have to be big, they can be very small, a small piece of you becomes a jelly bean in that jar until you are not just this one person, this one identity, this essence that I see that is beautiful and gorgeous and vibrant and amazing and doing everything in life. You are the summary of all of these thousands of different pieces, possibly thousands, I don't know, all within you. And if your life is so really, truly hard, if your life is truly traumatic, then that gives rise to the potential of dissociative identity disorder, or what used to be known as multiple personalities, because all of these little pieces start to look out for themselves and try to take over the main essence, the body of you, me, whatever, to be. So the idea here if I can get back to the idea, is that part of the reason for our behavior, part of the reason for the choices that we make, part of the reason for becoming more aware of the voice that pops up in our head and giving it space before reaction and just sort of being who we are, is that because of our misaligned training, our theta brain training, our subconscious training, our experiences in life that change who we are and how we perceive things, right? Just because we have a traumatic event, it changes how we perceive the future. And then the language that we learn around that, maybe you learn Spanish around that. So when you have an influence an experience that comes to you and it's amazing and it's crazy and it's fun and it's great, you speak Spanish because that's something that happened in your past. And maybe it's French, maybe it's German, maybe it's Thai. Like there are experiences, especially when you speak multiple languages, there are experiences that cause those reactions in your brain, in your body to spark up, and you can instantly shift into a paradigm of yourself that is not exactly speaking English. And that's fine, that's great. And so the challenge of becoming the enlightened being that you are becoming, because all of us are on this path to enlightenment, it is just taking some longer than others, right? Because we're all sort of the same basic consciousness. When we look at this from that quantum level, right? The quantum field is all of possibility, and the quantum field is waves of energy all around us all the time. And when we come into this physical form, we are quite literally training the energy of this physical form to encompass, to hold, to be the sum of energy of the consciousness that we're allowing into it. That is essentially your life experience, is the point that you start coming down and making this body yours. And again, this happens in the womb, right? The subconscious training. There are cells that retain this memory. There are energetic portions of you. In fact, proteins in your body, your DNA is changed by this memory. The things that are happening to you then changes you for the rest of your life. And then the theta level and then everything else, all of these different things split the personality. So the idea here is that in this quantum identity world, you actually are the energies of all of these different personalities, of all these different aspects of yourself. And part of the challenge for you, part of the challenge of free will, right? God gave us free will. It's a trick, and it's awesome, and it's challenging, because up to the point that you realize that to enter your body, to be in your body, to be of your body, you actually have to resonate, to feel. Like, when was the last time you actually sat down and said, okay, how does my gut feel about this situation? How does my heart feel about this situation? And the challenge here is to accept that this has knowledge, has an ability that is beyond the sort of mental, logical, neocortex, prefrontal cortex, like all those fancy things for this part of your brain. Your body has stuff that compensates and communicates with it. And a lot of times what we're trained away from is listening to the body, listening to where we are. Instead, we get tied into those feelings of trying to be more, to be worthy, to be enough, to be, there's so much trauma. There's so much trauma in early life that convinces us that we are not enough, that we are separate from others, that we are never going to be worthy, that we have to be perfect, that we, wow, that one, have to be perfect. How many of you feel like you have to be perfect? It's a lie. It's just a flat out lie. You don't have to be perfect. You are good enough now at anything. And when you communicate, you do it with intention, right? You don't just say the first thing that pops off your head, right? Because that is very emotional driven. That's very caveman driven. That's very survival driven. And we're not those people. We are not that civilization. What would our life be like? What would this world be like if that was our civilization right now? What would everything be like? Like, we wouldn't be a civilization. Things would crumble. We are where we are because at some point the metaphysical world likes to use the term "wake up," and I guess I'm waking up. I don't know. Because when you wake up, you realize that all of this training, all of language, all of the way that you have been up till now has sort of been like you were just in training. You got your green belt, you got your yellow belt, your purple belt, your white belt. I'm not doing belts in any certain order, and I haven't studied kung fu or karate or any of those things, so don't yell at me about my belt orders. But here's the thing, I do know this. When you get to black belt, you're just starting. You've learned the basics. When you get to black belt, you can finally go, okay, what's next? How do I take control of this in a mindful manner to move forward? And that's the complication of being. Because when you can accept that you cannot change your past, you can't change what happened to you in the womb, you can't change what happened in all of the time that you spent learning about the world up till 6 or 7, you can't change what happened in school and how you reacted to it, because you are here now, right? There's always just now. Eckhart Tolle, I tell you, that guy kind of blew my mind, because it really reset my mind. There is no time. You are just now. Which means all of this training that we've had to get wherever we are, all of these thoughts that were put in our head, all of these split personalities that end up sounding like different voices in our head telling us to do different things or be different things or be different people, act all the time, make your choice. And all those choices change your perception. They change how your brain thinks about things. And when you change the perception, when you change how those little voices inside respond, changes how the world comes to you. Okay, so if it changes how the world comes to you, are we adjusting the quantum field? Are we adjusting our base frequencies? Are we adjusting our vibration? I don't know. I'd like to think so. I like to think that changing these things actually makes a huge impact on who we are. And by accepting that we can't change the past, by accepting that those things happened in the past, whatever that training was, by being really mindful of the language we learned when communicating with a very certain person who is meaningful to you or me, by choosing words that convey well and asking questions, remaining curious. What do you mean by that? We're actually affecting deeper change, because we're not just making a relationship, we're not just making a connection, making communication happen. I love making communication happen. We're not just doing that. We're actually integrating some of those little jelly beans in the jar, right? That jar at the carnival that has hundreds, thousands of jelly beans in it, and you're supposed to guess how many. Well, when you start working through these issues, when you start realizing you've reached the black belt because you're an adult, you're not a kid anymore, you can take care of yourself. You can do the things that you always wanted if you still want to do them. You have the time, you have the space. This is all on you. You have the capability to accomplish anything. If you can move past some of the stories that you told yourself, and some of those stories are those jelly beans, just whispering things in your ear. They're not true. They were things, they may have been true at one point in time, they may have been trained into you at one point in time, but the power of becoming who you are always meant to be is the power of integrating all of these pieces, integrating all of the things that you have learned, integrating all of who you are, and standing in your strength, complete with language. And the knowledge that language is only effective if you are creating a bridge with it. If you are simply moving outwards with it, then there is nothing, because unfortunately a lot of people, like the sales clerks at the beginning of this whole video here, the sales clerks, they weren't listening. The way that they were trained, the way that they were being, the way that they've done anything, they didn't listen. All I wanted was somebody with authority, and they wanted to solve a problem. They didn't want to actually help me. They just wanted to be the hero. So this has been the complications of language and being. I hope this has meant something to you, or you enjoyed it and you learned a thing or three. Yeah. So that's about all I've got to do for today. If you want to chat with me about my program, Manifest Design, that's all about identifying the words that your story, the things that you tell yourself for the future that you are growing, then just comment down below, make a little magnet or say, yeah, Manifest Design, something like that, and I will go ahead and reach out to you. If you're interested in business branding, using these same tools of the quantum field and vision setting and really understanding how to pull your team together, right? Because an individual with their mind and their set and their communication, these skills, and really integrating all of that, a corporation is the same thing. A business is the same thing. All of these things apply just on a broader scale, and creating the unity in the different personalities is integral to get everyone rowing in the same direction in the business. If you're interested in some of that, go ahead and check out my website, www.thinktankcreative.net. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye.